Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh to some, and peace out to the rest of you. It ain't your boy, it's your man's. The blackest heart, blackest minded, blackest man on social media, sounding black in and shining again, asking you to hit the share button because the message is more important than the messenger. I wrote out a prepared statement to address this issue, and my device just erased it without me hitting the delete button. So even though I still have the same writing, I'm just not going to go through it. Now, in my second to last recording, I entitled it, Even If You Don't Mind Big Bertha. I said that at some point I need to record something about how we as a community can raise kids to be ready for marriage when they're younger. And I'm simply going to say, that's of course because as a Muslim, I'm not going to recommend fornication, but I am going to recommend marriage. And I'm not going to recommend putting off marriage and putting off chastity just because that's what the Western white world has put on its kids, because see, they're not necessarily promoting chastity when they do it. We already know that. People go through they go through their youth and they'll do all sorts of nasty things, and even if they believe in some kind of chastity, but they go through their youth, they'll just do other nasty things aside from regular, normal, natural sex, and the problem is that ruins the sexual center of the brain. We can raise people to where their maturity, overall maturity, is caught up with their sexual maturity. This can be done. There's one thing that is hindering this, really, and I'll tell you what it is, and that is simply put the effects of one movie that came out in the 1950s, Rebel Without a Cause. I think it starred Marlon Brando. I never saw the movie, but a lot of people, especially psychologists and professors, have said that this was the beginning of the modern concept of the teenager that we now have in our heads, that's international. Previously, the concept of the teenager was merely a concept of transition from childhood to adulthood. It was not an idea that you have to be rebellious and stupid and combine the worst of adult critical thought with childish impulses and the best of neither one, and that the rest of the society was simply supposed to be patient and deal with it because you're a teenager. It was not seen as a time in which you could do dumb things that were just downright immoral, and then years later when you get confronted with the results, you could say, oh, well, I was young, I was a teen at that time, I was a kid. It wasn't understood that way in the beginning. Now it is. And you will see scenarios in which, you see how teenagers behave towards each other in middle and high school, and you will assume that they can't do any better because that's how we have been trained to think about it. And that's been, if you take a generation as being 30 years, which used to be the definition of a generation, about 30 years, you now understand that we've been through two generations that came up thinking this way. The ones who were adults in the 1950s are gone. So we now don't have a living memory of people that were alive before this current corrupt misconception of what a teenager is took root. So if we remove these concepts of what the teenage phase actually is in the first place, then we remove the hindrance to people's maturity. Let's just be honest. This was a weapon, and it was a very powerful weapon, because while it was shown in a movie that was for white and black audiences alike, it was really for white audiences. But the makers knew that black folks were going to be in movie theaters in the segregated balconies above the heads of our kidnappers and captors and murderers' grandkids. They will be down in the bottom in the galley watching the movie, and we will be up in the balcony watching the same movies. They knew this. So when this idea was aimed at the audiences, their society was prepared to forgive the same antics from their own teenagers for which they would throw the book at any of our teenagers. You understand now? This was a weapon, a very powerful psychological weapon. And I'm sure that they meant it the way that I just described. They were going to overlook this in their own teens, And these same things were going to be highly punished in any of our teens because, as much as white America looks at black folks as being mentally underdeveloped, they also look at us as being older than we are, especially when it's time to assign blame. But now when it's time to assign credit, they don't. So anyway, that being said, we now understand one idea that was put out largely in one movie and that has since been reinforced in a majority of movies that have ever catered to young audiences. This idea that the teenager simply cannot be as moral as older people. That's not true. They may not have to be as mature. They don't have to be as experienced. Nobody blames them for that. I mean, if you've only been an adult for 2 years, then you just don't know what someone who's been an adult for 20 years will know. Nobody logically would blame them for such. But morally speaking, people don't realize a 15-year-old that can have children is just as morally capable as a 55-year-old. People don't understand that. The moral understanding is actually there by the time of sexual maturity. We just give them a pass, and they may actually think that they don't have the moral reasoning capacity of someone older, and that limit is the only reason they might actually not have it. Intrinsically, it's there. They just don't use it because they don't think it's there. I mean, if you think you can't, if you think you can't score a soccer goal, then you probably actually can't do it. But if you know how it can be, if you know you got the muscles to do it, then you can simply train yourself to where you hit it on target and you get better at it. It's the same thing. So the only reason that a teenager is morally inferior to someone that is a more seasoned adult is because they think they are, so they don't use the moral reasoning capacity. And why should they if the entire society has told them implicitly you really can't have the same moral understanding of right and wrong? But then, of course, when it's a black teen, we know what happens then. We and white folks alike want to hold the standard, you throw the book at them. If we get rid of this idea that they came up with, a false idea, that they were going to weaponize against us for adopting in the first place, we've taken care of a lot right there. If we get rid of that, let's be honest, what's going to then remain in place to stop younger folks from getting married? Finances might be an issue, but that's actually a bit easier to remedy than the psychological issue that's already in front of us, against which I just spoke. Stop raising. See, when your kid is born, first thing you got to understand is that when they're born, you've got to look at your daughter and realize you just gave birth to somebody's wife. Yes, your daughter. Yes, your parents' granddaughter, but also someone's wife. And you got to understand that from a very young age. You don't have to, I'm not talking about raising child brides or grooms for that matter. What I'm saying is that when they're kids, you got to understand and remember that who you are raising is also someone's wife. And the mom to your own grandkids. You understand? Same thing with your son. When your son comes out, you got to understand you're not just raising your baby. You ain't just raising your parents' grandson. You are also raising somebody's future wife. Somebody's future husband. If you keep this in mind from the very beginning, then you've taken that first step to raising more mature kids at younger ages. And then having more mature adults. Right now, let's just be honest. We already know this. Right now, what has happened is that we have not done this. And consequently, many of us, we allow them to go through the same nigger teenage phase through which we went when we were teenagers. Because we thought that's what we were supposed to do. We thought we were supposed to be dumb niggas as teens. Most of us never got a particular talk that is needed. We got the talks about the birds and the bees. Some of us have even gotten talks about how to handle the police. But one of the other talks about how to handle the police should have been how to handle the teenage nigger phase that they want you to go through, and that's even been injected into the culture along with the police, because the police are there largely to grab young black folks, fresh out their teens or in their teens, doing what? Dumb teenage things for which they would overlook their own teens pulling off. Pranks, vandalism, little shoplifting, stupid stuff like that. They will overlook in their kids, especially those of their own kids who got money or whose parents got money. So this whole thing was a trap, and you can see that we've been falling for it, because do our teens on average behave better than their teens? That's debatable. It's debatable. But do our teens think that they are behaving better on average than white teens? No. We don't think that they are, and they don't think they are. That's where the difference comes in. Because neither we nor do our teens think that phase is artificial in the first place. There is no naturally rebellious phase for people to go through. That doesn't exist. You can look in older cultures that are still being practiced, and they don't have this idea that the teen has to be rebellious while he's under your roof, eating your food, consuming your resources. They don't have a mind like that. That's not the way they think. This is a new idea, relatively new. I mean, in terms of human history, it's new, but there's just, everybody alive nowadays grew up under this idea. That's the sad thing about it. Now, one of the ways I want people to understand that this thing is a weapon. This misconception of what it means to be a teenager is a weapon. And one of the ways that you can tell that somebody had to go through it is in the writing that you see now is among adults. See, Islam, I've told you before, is a solution for us, and it is. But many of the solutions are preventive and not remedial. So, even if someone is born to practicing Muslim parents, the most dangerous years are those teenage years because of the idea we have of the teenage phase, which is really just weaponized niggerdom. That's when they're most likely to go off and not apply any of the solutions. Okay. Because this is largely preventive and not remedial, if you go through this phase, the artificial phase, not just go through your teenage years chronologically, you have to live 15 years to live 16 years, of course. But if you go through that teenage nigger phase that somebody concocted, and then what's going to happen is that certain effects are going to be permanent, even if you reform later. And a lot of us make the mistake of thinking, well, we're going to go through this dumb nigger phase while we're young, and then we're going to reform later. You got cats that's gang banging and shooting right now, and they're thinking in their mind, when I get older, I'm going to become Muslim. No, you can if you live long enough, but you need to understand that you're still going to deal with certain negative consequences. They're going to be permanent, and they're not going to go away because you changed your faith or became more serious about the faith with which you grew up. That's not how it works. You got tattoos, you still going to have them after you're Muslim, unless you got the money to get them removed. But to get the money to get them removed, you got to get a good job somehow. To get a good job, you got to not, in most cases, you got to not have a felony on your record. You're going to have a felony on your record because you're going to get caught doing something stupid. And that's going to be permanent. Do you see where I'm going with this? Some of these dudes are actually shooting and banging now, and they think, well, I'm okay. When I get old, I'm going to become Muslim, but by then I'm going to have gold teeth and tattoos, and I can use those to impress the ladies when it's time for me to get married. Sad thing is that's actually been given a lot of legitimacy by a lot of the women. That is true. But the effects, negative effects, are still going to be permanent, and those are going to drive her away. That's the sad thing. Now, if that's the only way you knew to go, what happens when you have your own babies? What idea are they going to have of what the teenage years are supposed to be like before they become teenagers? By the time they become teenagers, You're not going to be able to guide them in a way such as to bypass that teenage nigga phase, which is what we need as a people. You're going to have to hopefully guide them through the teenage nigga phase when we need to bypass it as a people to begin with. Therein is the mistake and the correction to it. Bypass this. And if we have to start homeschooling the kids so that they're not all around each other and there are so few adults around, then that's what we got to do. If we got to start eating less so as to save money so that somebody can be at home to homeschool them, then that's just what we got to do. Because what we're dealing with right now is that misconception of what it means to be a teenager being damn near institutionalized. And those are the most dangerous years to lose anybody morally. And you can tell when somebody insisted on going through this based on how they write as an adult. That's why I keep talking about literacy in your first language. You see someone, and some of you were in my comment sections agreeing with me. We cool, but you write like baboons on a keyboard. To be honest with you, you can't write the difference between there, and there. The preposition, the possessive, and the contraction for they are. You don't know how to spell the difference between them? You're using THERE as a possessive? Yeah. So you just had to go through the dumb teenage nigga phase, huh? You had to. You were too cool for school back when you were in English class. And now you've reformed as an adult, you're more mature, but you're illiterate. Functionally speaking, as an adult, you're illiterate. That's permanent. You got to go back and take remedial reading and writing in order to fix that. But the ones who can write correctly right now at this point, either they went back and fixed it retroactively like Malcolm did, or they bypassed that teenage nigga phase to begin with. And so when they were actually teenagers in English class, they didn't think it was lame and square to actually pay attention and learn how to write certain things correctly so that you're not a functionally illiterate adult. We got to change a lot of these things, but this is the main thing we got to change because this is the main division between us right now, to be honest. Most of us, when we get into our 30s, we've been through some kind of reform. The problem is, at what age was this reform? We don't have to go through a damn reform if we simply start off the right way. And we didn't. Because when we let our teenagers get together to have fun, it's cool to let them get together to have fun. The problem is we are prepared. Even if we don't show this to them, we are prepared to overlook a lot of dumb stuff coming from them. Oh, they teens. Man, shuck that fit. They know right from wrong just like somebody in their 50s does. They may not have as much experience, but they know right from wrong just like someone in their 50s does. When they do stuff that is wrong, it is our job to whoop them or beat the snot out of them like we would an adult. Because technically speaking, they are. Oh, yeah. Yeah, believe it or not. Sexual maturity, Islamically speaking, is adulthood. Morally speaking, that's adulthood. And like I said, if financial considerations are the only reason that they can't get married, that's easy to remedy. But first, we got to get rid of somebody else's idea of what it means to be a teen that was weaponized against us, so as to further niggerize us, because they already were shocked that slavery did not fully niggerize us as much as they wanted it to. That the colonization of the homeland afterwards, because Africa was depopulated, did not fully niggerize and dehumanize us the way they wanted. And then Jim Crow didn't either. But when they really got us as a community was not only through the Tarzan movies, but through that movie, Rebel Without a Cause, and the idea that the teen has a license to be a damn fool. Because they weren't going to respect that license in us anyway. And a lot of us have, that's a talk we need to have with our kids when they're kids, before they reach the teens. We need to let them know, look, white folks got this idea that teenagers, it's okay for them to be stupid, but they ain't going to tolerate that from you. Not only is the idea false, it's not okay for them to be that way. They don't have to be that way. They're not going to tolerate it if you are the way they're going to overlook it in their own kids. So you young and you drive and you decide, I want to speed down this road. I want to drag race somebody. Yeah, okay, you do it. You drag race someone while you're a teenager. Guess what's going to happen? That white teenage drag racing is going to go home, especially if his parents got money. You go drag racing while you're a teenager, you're not going home, you're going to jail, and you're going to stand in front of a judge, and you're going to have to pay dearly in time, money, or both for one act of drag racing while you were a teenager. But more importantly, we need to let them know, if you do drag race while you're a teen and you mess around and kill someone even accidentally, we're not going to forgive you for it. You won't be able to, 35, you can't say, well, I was 15 when I did it. Nigga, you still knew how dumb that was and how dangerous it was. You didn't do it even though it's dangerous. You did it because it's dangerous, because you fell for the idea that as a teen, you were supposed to do stupid things, combining the worst of adult thinking and size and strength with the worst of childish foolishness. And the best of neither one. Get rid of these ideas. Get rid of this idea first. That's the thing we got to understand. We got to change our ideas about human development, change our understanding, and replace their misunderstanding, with which they meant to weaponize against us, with the classical understanding that has actually survived to produce generally stable societies. I hope that what I've said one day will no longer be necessary, and in the meantime, I hope it helps. And thanks for listening. By the way, before I go, I forgot to tell you one thing. What I just mentioned to you, gentlemen, is not something that a lot of ADO sisters are going to be on board with. There will be those who are, but usually the ones that are on board with this are already unavailable anyway. You are more likely to have success with trying to introduce this concept with someone that is not ADOS, not Western at all, actually. You're more likely to have this success with them, and the kids resulting therein will benefit. That's the other thing. You see, when I'm telling you can work, whether you're in the States or wherever you are, wherever it's implemented, it's going to work. But I want you to realize that this is necessary because the migration that I've been talking about is not only geographical, it is also psychological and cultural, and this is the first step in that migration. Thanks for listening. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.